Hello and welcome to Through the Big Book with Dr. Ben. My name is Ben and I'm an alcoholic. In this episode, we'll be going into Chapter 3, which is titled More About Alcoholism. And full disclosure, I actually skipped this whole entire chapter when I was making these series. So guys, forgive me. I don't know. I have no excuse. I just did. There's no reason why I skipped it. I just did. So, let's dive on in here. It says, most of us have been unwilling to admit we were real alcoholics. No person likes to think he's bodily or mentally different from his fellows. Therefore, it's not surprising that our drinking careers have been characterized by countless vain attempts to prove that we could drink like other people. The idea that somehow, someday, he will control and enjoy his drinking is the great obsession of every abnormal drinker. The persistence of this illusion is astonishing. Many pursue it into the gates of insanity or death. I could open up on personal experience on that paragraph quite a bit, as could all of us, but, I always thought that it was going to change. I always thought that someday I was going to find the right combination, or the right beer. Forgive me, my allergies. I'm back in Oklahoma with my family, so my allergies are driving me crazy. I always thought that I would find the right combination, a certain type of beer or a certain type of wine. If I got a fancy enough wine, from, an old Bordeaux or Chateauneuf de Pape, or maybe if I tried a certain drug, like just marijuana or cocaine or stimulant pills, just whatever it was, that it somehow, some way I would find the right, the magic bullet. But I never did. It says, we learned that we had to fully concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholics. This is the first step in recovery. Oh my goodness. So you're saying on page 30, we're finally talking about a specific first step. And that's all it is. It's just that after reading all about, there's a solution. I'm reading, all through that. We learn what an alcoholic is. I just have to admit that all of this stuff sounds so striking. It's almost like they're reading my story. And I've never met these people, and it's from 84 years ago. The delusion that we're like other people or presently maybe has to be smashed. And that's basically like that my reaction is different than other people's. When I drink, like in, I think it was my third semester, I don't remember, the first med school that I was in. Drinking was pretty prevalent whenever we would finish an exam, and I would go out with my buddies, and I would have, a drink or two with them, and they might have 3 or 4, and they might get drunk. But they would, at some point, they would stop, and they would go home, and they would go to bed. And it didn't matter what the occasion was, what we were drinking, what were you using in addition to that. I didn't stop. I could not stop. There was not one normal time where it was like, I could just be, I no longer had that capacity. And I knew that I was never going to be able to do that. That's part of the first step. That is the first step, sorry. I hear a lot of people say that that's the only step we have to do 100%. And I agree with that. I have to buy into this. If I have these lurking notions that, well, I haven't tried, heroin yet, or with vodka. If you mix vodka and heroin, it works if you're an alcoholic, and you won't, whatever. I'm making that up, but if I have some kind of lurking notion that I can try something else and one day I'll be able to pull this off, I haven't completed step 1. You see? So we alcoholics are men and women who have lost the ability to control our drinking. We know that no real alcoholic ever recovers control. All of us felt at times that we were regaining control, but such intervals, usually brief, were inevitably followed by still less control, which led in time to pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. So let's look that up. What does demoralization mean? Demoralization. Got multiple syllables on that one. It says to cause to turn aside or away from what is good or true morally, to corrupt the morals of, to weaken the morale, discourage and dispirit. All right. We're looking at a bad time there. And so that's what that's one of the questions that I was asked whenever I was being taken through this book by my sponsor was, has that happened to you? Does that sound familiar? Where you might have, a couple weeks or a month or even a couple years. I remember periods where I had 6 months without drinking or 8 months and it was okay. I was fine. I had a normal life. And then the next time I drank, I figured since it had been so long, my life circumstances had changed. This time is going to be different. But what I found out is that I actually had less control, and some kind of event would occur, and I would say I can't ever do that again. And so then it says, we're convinced to a man that alcoholics of our type are in the grip of a progressive illness. Over any considerable period, we get worse, never better. And that's what progressive means. It just means more and more of something, right? So that's my case. That's my experience, is that my alcoholism, as I got older and as I drank more, it just continued to get worse. And from what I've seen, people go through stages where they develop a more chronic and more severe alcoholism, There's many shades to this, many different types of phases that I see people in. It's not just all or nothing. It's not just we're under the bridge or we're not. I mean, there's, it's a loss of control here. That's what we're looking for. And so then it says we're like men who have lost their legs. They never grow new ones. Neither does there appear to be any kind of treatment which will make alcoholics of our kind like other men. We've tried every imaginable remedy. In some instances, there has been a brief recovery, followed always by still a worse relapse. Has that happened to you? Physicians who are familiar with alcoholism agree there is no such thing as making a normal drinker out of an alcoholic. Science may one day accomplish this, but it hasn't done so yet. Despite all we can say, many who are real alcoholics are not going to believe that they're in this class. By every form of self-deception and experimentation, they will try to prove themselves exceptions to the rule, and therefore non-alcoholic. Does that sound familiar to you? If anyone who is showing inability to control his drinking can do the right about face and drink like a gentleman, our hats are off to him. Heaven knows, we've tried hard enough and long enough to drink like other people. Now this is good. It says, here are some of the methods we've tried. Drinking beer only, limiting the number of drinks, never drinking alone, never drinking in the morning, drinking only at home, never having it in the house, never drinking during business hours, drinking only at parties, switching from scotch to brandy. This is my favorite, drinking only natural wines. Agreeing to resign if ever drunk on the job, taking a trip, not taking a trip, swearing off forever with and without a solemn oath, taking more physical exercise, reading inspirational books, going to health farms and sanitariums, accepting voluntary commitment to asylums. We could increase the list ad infinitum, which means to infinity, forever. This is just a very, very small shade of the vast spectrum of ways that we try to beat the game. You've probably got yours as well. I've got mine. Mine was very drug heavy, where I would just do drugs, which is, I know that sounds insane, but that's what this thing is. I wouldn't drink, but I would just do, smoke pot and do cocaine and take stimulants, because I was an alcoholic. Alcohol's my problem. I can't drink alcohol. It's ridiculous. And then, But then it's like, well, but a couple of drinks will potentiate the cocaine. So I'll just have a couple, and then boom, I'm an alcohol, and I'm drinking like crazy from that one decision. It's just, oh my God, we are some silly people, but we're creative. That we are some crafty people, some very crafty and crafty people to try to get around this thing. So, diagnostic. This is one of the only things that I've ever seen that is a self-diagnostic disease. Exclusively exclusively says we don't like to pronounce any individual as alcoholic, but you can quickly diagnose yourself. How's that, Ben? It says step over to the nearest bar room and try some controlled drinking. Wow, that sounds nice. It says try to drink and stop abruptly. There's the key there. Have a couple of beers and then stop. Then it says try it more than once. Okay, cool. So I can go out the next 3 days and have 2 beers or something. It says it will not take long for you to decide if you're honest with yourself about it. It may be worth a bad case of jitters if you get a full knowledge of your condition. So there you go. Give it a shot. If you're on the fence, give it a shot. Go give it a shot and learn. Go take some shots, I guess, would be the more fitting thing to say. Go take a shot. Go take 2 shots and then just stop. Hang out, play some pool, and once your buzz is gone, go home. I'll tell you, I could not do that. I'm not going to stop. Once the party is started, it is not stopping. So, it says there is no way of proving it. We believe that early in our drinking careers, most of us could have stopped drinking. But the difficulty is that few alcoholics have enough desire to stop while there's yet time. We've heard a few instances where people who showed definite signs of alcoholism were able to stop for a long period because of an overpowering desire to do so. Here is one. Okay, so here are where the parables begin. So we have, the man of 30, we've got Jim, we got Fred, who else? I think there's one more guy in here too. Anyways, we'll get to it. The jaywalker. So we got a man of 30 here. What is happening with the man of 30? So he was doing a great deal of spree drinking. He was very nervous in the morning after these bouts and quieted himself with more liquor. He was ambitious to succeed in business, but he saw that he would get nowhere if he drank at all. Once he started, he had no control whatsoever. He made up his mind that until he'd been successful in business and had retired, he would not touch another drop. An exceptional man, he remained bone dry for 25 years and retired at the age of 55 after a successful and happy business career. Then he fell victim to the belief with which practically every alcoholic has. And here's our little, the lesson in our parable. It says that his long period of sobriety and self-discipline had qualified him to drink as other men. So that's our little question there, or the thing that as alcoholics we think we can do, right? To be abstinent, to be dry for a long time, and also to accomplish a lot. That's another thing we see a lot is, once I get this degree or what, blah blah blah, make this amount of money, then I can drink and do what I want. So it says, out came his slippers and a bottle. In 2 months he was in a hospital, puzzled and humiliated. He tried to regulate his drinking for a while, making several trips to the hospital meantime. Then, gathering all his forces, he attempted to stop altogether and found he could not. Every means of solving his problem which money could buy was at his disposal. Every attempt failed. And though a robust man at retirement, he went to pieces quickly and was dead within 4 years. This case contains a powerful lesson. Most of us have believed that if we remain sober for a long stretch, we could therefore drink normally. But here's a man who at 55 years found he was just where he had left off at 30. We've seen the truth demonstrated again and again. Once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. Commencing to drink after a period of sobriety, we are in a short time as bad as ever. If we are planning to stop drinking, there must be no reservation of any kind, nor any lurking notion that someday we will be immune to alcohol. All right, so, there's a phrase in meetings, it's like your disease is out there doing push-ups in the rain, it's getting stronger and all this stuff. I mean, that may be the case. For me, my disease picked up pretty much exactly where I left off. I like to have a good time. There are a lot of people that like to stay at home and drink and who are kind of the closet, I shouldn't say closet, but just there's the people who like to drink at home. That's probably the most common type. I like to drink out in public and just go crazy. That was just my thing. That's what I enjoyed. And gosh, where was I going with that? Oh, right. So it was just when I relapsed, this last time that I relapsed after 4 years, 4.5, I think it might have been 5 years without drinking. I'm telling you, it was right where it was when I had quit in 2012. It was scary. It just about, it was sloppy. I had to be carried to a taxi, and then from the taxi, I had to be carried inside. It was horrible and very embarrassing. I had no idea what had happened. I was having a good time and, and just hanging out with my buddies. And then suddenly I wake up at home in my bed, and it's like, what? And I see pictures, I hear stories, and it just sucks, And so that's how mine had left off, or how mine started up. I've sponsored a lot of people, and some of them have unfortunately relapsed. And, I don't hear from them again. Rarely. I'll hear from some who do okay, but they it's really tough. These relapses are tough, and there's not a definite page or a chapter on relapses. We talk about it in To Wives and a couple of other spots. To Employers, if I'm not mistaken, but we'll look at that later. But nonetheless, here at the end, it says there's got to be no reservations of any kind. So, and then it says, young people may be discouraged by this man's experience to think that they can stop as he did on their own willpower. We doubt if many of them can do it because none will really want to stop, and hardly one of them, because of the peculiar mental twist already acquired, will find he can win out. Several of our crowd, men of 30 or less, had been drinking only a few years, but they found themselves as helpless as those who had been drinking 20 years. To be gravely affected, one does not necessarily have to drink for a long time or take the quantity some of us have. This is particularly true of women. Potential female alcoholics often turn into the real thing and are gone beyond recall in a few years. Certain drinkers who would be greatly insulted if called alcoholics are astonished at their inability to stop. So before we move on too far, I just want to say that estrogen's effect on liver enzymes has shown that it causes alcohol to metabolize differently, which is one of the reasons that we wind up with alcoholism. And so it's not like they're not saying something of like it doesn't have to do with sexism. It has to do with the way that our body processes alcohol, and so they're not being sexist there. That's just human physiology and human biochemistry. So it says we're familiar with these symptoms. We who are familiar with these symptoms see large numbers of potential alcoholics among young people everywhere, but try and get them to see it. And then there's a little asterisk at the bottom. It says, this is true when this book was first published, but in 1998, in the United States and Canada, membership survey showed about 1/5 of AAs were 30 or under. Pretty impressive. So it says, as we look back, we feel we'd gone on drinking many years beyond the point where we could quit on our own willpower. Here's diagnostic criterion number 2, your second challenge, if you will. It says, if anyone questions whether he has entered this dangerous area, let him try leaving liquor alone for 1 year. Give it a shot. It says, if he's a real alcoholic and very far advanced, there's a scant chance of success, which means very, very small. In the early days of our drinking, we occasionally remain sober for a year or more, becoming serious drinkers again later. And though you may be able to stop for a considerable period, you may yet be a potential alcoholic. It says, we think few to whom this book will appeal can stay dry anything like a year. I mean, we're on page 34 of the book Alcoholics Anonymous, right? And you're listening to a podcast or whatever this is. Chances are pretty good, right? So it says some will be drunk the day after making their resolutions, most of them within a few weeks. So for those who are unable to drink moderately, the question is how to stop altogether. We're assuming, of course, that the reader desires to stop. Whether such a person can quit upon a non-spiritual basis depends upon the extent to which he's already lost the power to choose whether he'll drink or not. So many of us felt that we had plenty of character. There was a tremendous urge to cease forever, yet we found it impossible. This is the baffling feature of alcoholism as we know it, this utter inability to leave it alone, no matter how great the necessity or the wish. Now that's what brings us all in here. That's why we all come to AA, is because I knew I didn't want to drink anymore, but yet I did. It was like I couldn't not drink. It was my release. Consequences be damned. It was just something that I had to do. But then when I wanted to stop and just found that I really could not, where else are you going to go? What are you going to do? Nothing else worked for me. And so that's what we all have in common. That's what brings us all in here. So it says, how then shall we help our readers determine, to their own satisfaction, whether they are one of us? The experiment of quitting for a period of time will be helpful, but we think we can render an even greater service to alcoholic sufferers and perhaps to the medical fraternity. So we shall describe some of the mental states that precede a relapse into drinking, for obviously that is the crux of the problem. Now, crux to me means the core. I'm going to look it up real quick just to see. So it means the decisive or most important point at issue. So, again, the mental states that precede a relapse are the crux of the problem. So, we've been talking about all the physical stuff in the doctor's opinion, and I can tell you all these big enzymes, and all these pathways and these genes and all this, brain stuff, and somebody else can tell you all this social, background and family and trauma and blah, blah, blah. Well, then don't drink. Just don't drink. But the thing is we see in diagnostic criterion number 2, well, then just don't do it for 1 year. Just 1 year. We're not saying forever, just don't drink for a year. But the thing is that we can't. We have this body that obviously can't tolerate alcohol and a mind that can't tolerate sobriety. So we got to work on this mind thing. What are these mental states that precede a relapse? So we already learned that you can be as successful as possible. You can remain bone dry forever and still drink and wind up dying within, a short period of time. So it's going to talk about the rest of these parables are going to talk about the mental states that precede relapse into drinking. So since that's the core of the problem, or the decisive or most important point at the issue, which seems like something we should know a little bit about, we are going to dive into that, and I'll just pick up right there in the next episode. So I'll see you guys there.